Sego, Zegwego, and welcome to another episode of Onkwariwa'shón. We are pleased to provide you with news and information from the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe's divisions and programs. We're happy to share all the work that is being done to help build a better tomorrow. I'm your host, Brendan White. In this episode, we talk about recent events that have been taking place in Standing Rock, North Dakota. Joining me for that discussion are members of the St. Regis Mohawk Tribal Council. They are Tribal Chief Ron Lafrance, Beverly Cook, Eric Thompson, and Sub-Chief Cheryl Jacobs. Now, before we begin, perhaps we can provide our viewers with an overview of what are we seeing out there? What is happening in Standing Rock?
Well, there's a lot happening. There on Friday there was a big to-do with the construction company came in with bulldozers, and they also brought in a private security force. The people that were at the protest site crossed the line onto the property, and they were met with attack dogs. Some people were bitten. There's even footage of one of the protesters getting manhandled by one of the security officers. I spoke to a friend that I met there on Saturday night and asked him if this stuff was true, and he said it's absolutely true, and that it there were more and more protesters coming onto the actual site. They tried to push them back with the dogs, and some of the dogs were like vicious attack dogs. And a child got bit, and a pregnant woman got bit, and there was many men that got bit. And as more and more people converged onto the site, they backed up and they got in their trucks, and then they eventually went away. But and there was also a police helicopter that was circling around top, and our friend out there is very concerned that this is one of those stall tactics that they're going to or force the judge to make a wrong decision, and by saying that, well, look at what the Indians are doing, they're not abiding by the court order, when there was an injunction that was they're supposed to halt construction. And then they did go in and they did unearth some burial sites and some burial cairns, and so when the people found out about that, they were extremely upset. Because they were actually, my friend told me that they're working at night as well. So they're getting more brazen, and they started doing the work during the day, and they were met by the protesters, and he said there was at least 3,000 people that had gathered that evening. If you saw some of the pictures that were on social media, it looked like it was like a rock festival. The cars were lined up on both sides of the roads, and even in the camp, people had their lights on, and was truly an amazing sight to see.
Now, you say halt construction. That was from a ruling that a federal judge made on August 24th for the construction of a Dakota Access Pipeline. What is the Dakota Access Pipeline?
Well, it's a pipeline that goes from South Dakota to and then it comes in through North Dakota. It goes through Iowa and then eventually ends up in Illinois. And what they're saying is that it's going to be able to produce about 750,000 gallons of crude oil per day. And there's that whole thing about, it's one of the ways to combat the reliance on foreign oil and stuff like that. But the bottom line is it's dirty. You're talking about crude oil that's coming, 1,700 miles in a pipe under the ground in parts where it's going to be exposed. And it's just not good for the environment, and more importantly, it's not good for people. There's about 10 million people that can be affected if there is a leak. When Cheryl and I were out at the camp, we met some people from Pine Ridge, and they remember when some of the uranium mines, when they leaked into their aquifer, they had to truck water in. And they're still trucking water, and it's not safe. So if you're looking at, a small little Indian reservation, think on a grand scale when there's 10 million people that could be affected by, a spill. And there's been 2 or 3 spills in the last couple of weeks. One in Yellowstone, there's been a couple in South Dakota. So we know that it's not safe.
It's not a matter. It's not a matter of when, of if. It's a matter of when. And one of the dangers, I think, particularly with this project, is that it's not all above ground. It goes below ground. So the monitoring of it is troubling. And some of the, when we were in the court listening to the oral arguments last week, the attorney for the construction company or for the project stated that they went down 200 feet in some areas to avoid certain areas. So there's 200. That's a depth of 200 feet. And if the pipe bursts, they're not going to know about anything that happens until it bubbles to the surface or until it leaches into the water supply. So it's troubling. It's really troubling.
Now, they're looking to bury the pipe under the ground. And why is that so significant out there?
Well, the instances that we were privy to that were brought up in the court case were instances where they had consulted with certain tribes. I think there were 3 tribes that they had consulted with. So in an effort to show that they had meaningful consultation and that they took those tribes' concerns seriously, when they came up on an area of concern that was pointed out by the tribe, rather than going around it, they went under it so as to not disturb it, and that was the depth that they chose to go.
Now, consultation, who would have been responsible for consulting with tribes? And did that happen with Standing Rock?
Well, it's the Army Corps of Engineers. I think they both have consultation processes that had to have been adhered to. It's a $3.7 billion project, and it's been ongoing for at least 3 years. And as Chief Lafrance pointed out, it spans over quite a bit of territory. So they've had consultation with different tribes, and they've had, to varying degrees. I'm not privy to how those consultations went, but they were part of the briefs, and that's part of what the judge will be looking at. With Standing Rock in particular, I think they felt that meaningful consultation wasn't going to be entered into, so they chose not to participate. Meaning that just the very act of their participation would have been a default or a de facto approval of the process itself, and none of their concerns would have been taken very seriously.
Now, is there a federal statute requiring consultation and executive order?
Yes, there is. One of the interesting things too is when they consulted with the city of Bismarck, they did not. The city itself did not want the pipeline coming near their territory, so they have, once again diverted the pipeline to come through the Standing Rock territory, and it's just really on the edge of the territory where this site is taking place. But it's just like here. I mean, that's part of their traditional and ancestral territory. They have burial mounds there, and they have sacred sites there. So that's one of the things that is sacred to them, and why they get so upset when you talk about consultation. Is it more than just checking the box, or are they actually hearing the concerns of the tribe? And in this case, Dave Archambault, the juniors, was saying that no, they didn't properly consult with the tribe, and then Chief Thompson said that they chose not to participate. And I think part of the reason why they didn't was because of the consultation process itself. Is it truly consultation, or are they just presenting something that they're going to do, and if you object, well, okay. Or if you object to what they're objecting to, is that going to halt construction? In this case, we see that it didn't.
And I think that part of the consultation process it's overly narrow, because it seems to be that they're only addressing where the pipeline is going, right? They're addressing any sites or any areas of concern along the pipeline. But the area of concern is much broader because of the water supply, which might not be directly on the pipeline, but it's a close proximity. So I think that it's too narrowly confined into where the actual pipe is going to go, not what it would happen should the pipe burst.
And in terms of getting the stay or the injunction, they had to demonstrate imminent harm, and because they hadn't actually started drilling beneath the lake, they couldn't demonstrate that. They couldn't say, well, the pipe could burst or the pipe could contaminate the water source in the court case. So they had to point to the disturbance of ancestral lands and historical sites as the imminent harm. So when they went to court, that's what they were arguing for. And to try to get an entity like a court to understand what Native people's connection is to the land is really difficult, because they can make it sound almost, you get the feeling from the judge that when you say, well, this is, where the buffalo roam is really important to us, there's a connection to the land and to beneath the land, to the water sources that are underneath the surface of the land, to the heart of Mother Earth. You can talk like that, and Native people are going to understand it. And when you go to a court, they're going to say, "Oh, where the buffalo roam? Where did the buffalo roam?" You're speaking two different dialects, and that becomes really frustrating. So going to court, when they extended the stay, it was because they hadn't started digging. And when they came and started moving the earth, it's a really common tactic that's used to incite the people who are trying to be peaceful, who are trying to use prayer, who are trying to maintain a certain stature within the protesters themselves, the people that live there, and for them to incite is a tactic that's used quite often. And I really was impressed in the face of those dogs and the mace that was being used on the people, that they really contained themselves well. So it's complicated, and if we could argue, or they could argue that the pipe is going to burst, then that should be another argument immediately as soon as if they start. I'm not hopeful.
Now, going back to the federal hearing on August 24th, the judge imposed a stay on the construction for another injunction hearing that's going to be held in September. Do you know the date?
September 9th, I believe, is the date. that was
September
set.
9th.
There'll be meetings that are scheduled for that date.
And with what was discovered on Friday, the federal judge held an emergency hearing yesterday. And that is for a restraining order, I believe, on the construction that the pipeline.
Right. I think it's for TRO, a temporary restraining order, which is ironic because they were supposed to halt all work in the interim, in this 2-week interim. But as Chief Cook pointed out, it's a tactic, a needling tactic on part of the company to provoke action and incite some type of reaction or violent behavior on part of the peaceful protesters. So I think that's what they're engaging in. So this smaller hearing on the TRO will address that, which will be a complete, an official restraining order against the company to halt all activities until the outcome or the preliminary injunction can be talked to or spoken to.
And I think if there were artifacts that were found there, then that's going to give the judge more information about what determines how do you define ancestral lands, and if there were ancient artifacts there, then that goes to that argument. And the other point that he wanted to clarify between now and the 9th was why there were two distinctly opposed definitions and ideas and explanations about what consultation was, and if there in fact was suitable consultation or if there wasn't. So there were opposing stands on that in the court, and that was the other thing that he wanted to clarify for himself.
And we certainly hope that at the next injunction hearing on September 9th that it's a favorable outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Now, going back to Standing Rock, and in particular Cannonball, Sub-Chief Jacobs, you accompanied Tribal Chief Ron Lafrance out there. What was the overall feeling that you received being out there?
Well, I'd like to start out by saying part of the reason why that we had attended was the week prior, Chief Lafrance and myself were actually in an environmental conference in Mohegan Sun. So throughout that week, everything that was being discussed, the facilitator of the 1 week environmental acknowledged that we were there, and we asked if she could acknowledge that we were going to be participating in attending to show support and unity to the cause, because Tribal Council had in the back at home, they were already working on the Tribal Council resolution to show the support that we were offering to give them as far as moral support. So Ron, Chief Lafrance, sent word back from Connecticut, seeing if anybody was interested in going. So the strategy was the two of us would go there, and then two chiefs, Thompson and Cook, would go to Washington, D.C. And so getting out there when we arrived, we didn't realize at first that two community members were also heading out that way. But when we got out there through Facebook and speaking with Philip and Mary Gray, we met up with them down the road. But when we first arrived down there, we had a couple from there that escorted us around. We didn't go through the barricades to get in there. They weren't allowing anybody to go in through the 1806 is the highway that runs through it. So that was all barricaded off. So we had to go around highway number 6, which took us probably 20, 30 miles out of the way. Then we had to cut back across. By the time the first day of travel was we were pretty tired. The next day when we got there, we purchased water, 20 cases of water, and Mary and Philip didn't have a vehicle because there was no vehicles at the airport that could be rented. I mean, there was thousands of people already there the weekend prior to that, like 3,000. So when we actually got to the main camp, because there's 2 camps out there. There's the site itself, where they halted the construction, where the flags are all being shown. Along that fence, up on the hill there is where the construction excavator wasn't working. The main camp, huge area, huge grounds. There was thousands of people there. Then the third camp is called Sacred Stone, and there's a story as to why that burial, the grounds is so sacred to the people. So after we got there the first day, it was a ceremony of an eagle. They were releasing 2 injured eagles back into the natural environment, the wilderness. And the local wildlife guy, he worked very closely with the tribal wildlife guy. And them two were really close. They had a really good working relationship. They did a pipe ceremony that day, and it was a feeling of calm. It was just so spiritual that first day. It was just like you were in awe to once things got started. With the women were on the one side with their pipes, the pipe carriers. The men were on the other side with their pipes, the male pipe carriers. Then the drums. But there was a spiritual elder, Ron, you remember his name.
Arval Looking Horse.
Very, very well-known, famous man for spiritual leadership and guidance and that. And he spoke, and then when the ceremony started, when they released those eagles, it was just those eagles went to the river. They went up to the sky, and they headed up towards the river, and everybody just turned, followed, watched them with their eyes and everything. Then you look up on the hill, and there's cars lined up with horses in front of them, and in front of them, the veterans are carrying flags, and some more horse riders and vehicles. So they come into the main camp now, down in. When they get off their horses, and Ron, and Phil were over where some of the younger guys were, the younger guys that were on horses, and I kind of stayed in the back where the veterans were. And we got some of that on tape and sent some of those things home too, for the community to see. And it was just so peaceful, everything, but every word that was spoken to us. When I introduced myself as where I was from upstate New York, the Akwesasne Territory, Mohawk Nation, and I pointed out where Ron, because we were spread out, introducing ourselves. Wherever Ron was, I said, we have a chief here also, I'm sub-chief. We have 2 chiefs in Washington, D.C. also for the court hearing, and they were just, we are so appreciative of you guys being here and your people in Washington. It was a proud moment to be able to go out there and be there and feel so like the unity. They were from all over the country.
And we saw some of those photos in the most recent issue of our local newspaper, Indian Time. But I kind of want to talk about something else. Earlier this summer, you had an opportunity to participate in a congressional roundtable on environmental injustice. Now, what was that discussion, and what are we hoping to accomplish with those talks?
Well, there's a parallel that runs through. It's a common narrative, and it's all throughout Indian country. And what we had hoped to do was to bring some focus and some attention to the fact that a lot of Superfund sites, a lot of environmental justice areas are located either in or around Indian country. The statistic for it, I think 30% or 50% of all the sites of Superfund sites in the country, I think they're located adjacent to or
I think there's
in
52 Superfund sites near Indian territories.
So it's our hope to bring attention to that and focus to that, to change the process with regards to consultation, with regards to the effect that tribes can have within the area of remediation of the sites, cleanup sites, the consultation process. So Chief Cook, Sub-Chief Connors, and I have been in DC, and we've worked diligently on this issue for about a year and a half, I'd say, meeting different congressmen, senators, the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, encouraging them to have a hearing on Superfund sites in Indian country. So Congressman Ruiz held this roundtable to discuss environmental justice concerns with various nations, various tribes throughout the nation, and it was timely. It preceded all of these events, but I think it's a common thread that runs throughout our territories, and there are similar concerns with regards to the water, the air, and the contamination of the land.
Very important. And again, it parallels what we're seeing right now out in North Dakota. Now, there was an overall message that the Standing Rock Sioux chairman has put out there, and I'm hoping you can share what that is, and we're hoping that people who are in support can continue to honor that wish.
That it be a peaceful, spiritual protest, that many things can be achieved through prayer or kind thoughts that are extended to other people. And I know that it's their wish that harm not come to anyone on either side, but that they have received advice and counsel from their spiritual leaders that it should be a protest that's led by prayer and that type of thought. And I think when we were in DC, when that type of positive energy and well-wishers come and support you that way, that it gives you strength. It also gives you hope. And sometimes the situations that we face when we're dealing with the government, or especially court systems, do not always go in our favor. And the fact, though, that we continue to stand up and to voice our concerns and to try to make right what's been made wrong is really important. So it was also, we received the same reception when we were in DC. There was a busload of people who had just driven 30 hours from Cheyenne River who were really happy that we were there. They were happy to hear, conversely, that we had a sub-chief and a chief out at the encampment, so they were encouraged, and I think holding them up is really important. And in times here at Akwesasne and in Haudenosaunee country, when we've had crises in the communities, and whether they were internal, external fights that we had to make, that the help of our relatives from out west and across Indian country, South America, we've often had people travel many miles to come and to give support. So I think it's we're related. We're all part of this creation, and so when there's something as important as this happening, we need to stand up for it, and that's what we try to do.
It feels like we're just one big family there supporting each other, and we're seeing support grow. I think when you guys went, there was probably 70, 80 tribes represented. It must be well over 100 by now. But we're seeing other people who are also prominent step up. We saw Vermont Senator and
Amnesty International.
Amnesty
was there when we were
International.
there.
Yep. Yep.
They were on the grounds on the main campground.
Leonardo DiCaprio was there, Willie Nelson and Neil Young were there. The young actress from No Fault of Our Stars, or whatever that movie.
Susan Sarandon.
Susan Sarandon. There's
Pharrell.
been Pharrell. Lawrence O'Donnell did a very nice piece on MSNBC. He was actually at the camp. Now there's over, I think, there are like 121 different nations that are represented. There were some Indian people from South America showed up on Saturday. There's Aborigines from Australia. So it's gathering support, and that's really what they wanted. And when Chief Cook was talking about leading this protest in prayer, when we were there, Cheryl and I were there, they had basically daily classes in nonviolent demonstration actions, like holding hands, locking arms, because as Indian people, when we get confronted, we like to be just as confrontational. They're training them how to basically just look the other way. And if you've seen some of the videos when the attack dogs were on them, they were in a group. But you'd never seen them to lash out or strike at the dogs. They just were pushing themselves. There was one guy who hit one of them, but if you're getting bit, that's human instinct is to protect yourself. But what they're doing in the camp is they're telling people that if you think that this is going to turn out in a violent way, then this is not the place for you. Because that's just how they want it to be, because we all know as Indian people that if we all show up and there's one hothead and things blow up, that's when everything goes bad, and they don't want it to turn that way. Like what Sub-Chief Jacobs was saying earlier is that every place that we went there, we were welcomed. Even in the hotel, there was people out in the morning or even late in the evening, just sitting there conversing, and they come up to us and want to know where we're from. Wow, that's a long ways to come. We're so glad that you came here to help show support. And we went to the Tribal Council building in Standing Rock. We're well received. It's just a great feeling to be a part of, knowing that you're a part of history. This is very historic. I don't know how it's going to end, but I hope it ends peacefully.
I just wanted to say, when we went to D.C. too, it was the same ceremonial practices that were happening. As people started to arrive, there was sage that was burning, people were smudging. There were spiritual leaders that were conducting greetings and prayers in their language. There was singing. It was all very friendly, and I think we were really happy to see relatives and friends from Haudenosaunee country arrive. There were 2 buses from Onondaga, and some of our community members rode down with them. It was a little bit last minute planning, so that we weren't able to supply a bus. It was, but they were able. Onondaga had room on their bus, so they were able to take some community members from here. And I think in those instances, any kind of division, disagreements that happen, within the community dissipate. When you're there for something that everyone believes in and everybody can get behind. So it was really nice to be able to stand with other people from Haudenosaunee country as well. And I think that always means something, to other Indian nations when Haudenosaunee representatives show up. And that's been part of our history, dating back to Wounded Knee.
Vic Camp shared a good story with us about Wounded Knee, Leonard Pouncey story. And that was one of the last camps where we met this man, and he's grew up very rough. He was from Pine Ridge Reservation, and his mom was cooking supper when we got there, all four of us. And he shared a story with us about how he was raised on Pine Ridge and what happened, because his mother was part of what happened with the Leonard Peltier, that whole incident. And they offered us supper, and it was wild rice and buffalo burgers and corn. And we were a little nervous because she offered it to us and we wanted her to eat first, his mom, Vic's mom. And she wouldn't allow it. She fed us all first, and she started a new plate of cooking her buffalo burgers and that, and she ate last. But Vic is a spiritual leader now too out there in his community. We also met another young man named Wynn, right? I met a lot of veterans. Like I said, they were just so appreciative. I never heard that word so much of having gone out there to. Mm-hmm. When they unloaded the water, I was trying to take photographs, but Ron, Philip, and then guys just came over and started helping unload the water. And the food and everything that was being donated, they were all logistics. They set up in tents and whatnot. They had a sign-in process to where you were from and things like that. We didn't realize that till the next day, but we got signed in.
When we were getting ready to leave.
Yeah, we got signed in. And the last day we were leaving, Ron must have stood there for probably a half hour or longer videoing the drumming that was going on. And I had to sit down. I was standing up too long, but there was a veteran next to me who was just so appreciative of you being out there. Mm-hmm. It was an unbelievable feeling.
Well, I just want to thank you all for joining us for this discussion today. And earlier you mentioned MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell and his episode called The Last Words. If you haven't, I certainly encourage you to locate that clip. It's very powerful words, and he shares with us the original relationship that we had. So speaking of last words, I would like to give each of you an opportunity to share some.
Well, when we went out to speak in front of the Standing Rock Tribal Council, I told them that 100 years ago, when Alco and the industries were starting to come here, nobody spoke up for us. And if you fast forward 100 years, we know that these things are not safe. Our community is sick. Our women have reproductive problems, or we have high rates of cancer, of diabetes, so we know that these things are not safe. And what I told them, that the people of the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation are here to support whatever it is that they need done. And I promised them that if, something was to happen, that we would be back, and this time we would bring numbers. And they really liked that. So, like Chief Cook said, in the case that something does happen, we will plan accordingly, so that for those who want to go, maybe we can get a bus or whatever it is that we're going to do to bring people out there to show support.
I think one of the best things that we can do for them out there is to keep spreading the word and keep it public and keep the events that are transpiring out there in the media so that people can see it, because one of the strongest tools, weapons that's been used against movements in the past is the radio silence. Nobody knows about it. Nobody's heard about it. So I think exposing the efforts of the peaceful protesters and exposing the activities of the oil companies and their tactics against the people is really important and is like a shield for them. So I just encourage people to keep sharing the recordings that are coming out of Standing Rock and sharing it with others.
Chief Thompson?
Well, I think that the overall events that have led up to what's occurring now and what is happening now, it serves as a flashpoint, I think, for singular action within Indian country, unity, everybody working in concert, focusing on a single action, a single issue. I think that we have strength in numbers. We've seen this intermittently throughout the years. You had the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And this is serving as a catalyst to focus the people's ideas on environmental protectionism and sovereignty. And I think those are two very powerful issues that are hand in hand here. And I think that the backdrop that we're serving as on the front lines of this is actually something that is of concern across both countries, the United States and Canada, for the entire population. So I think it's a very important symbolic event for people to acknowledge, but it's a very, very real event for within Indian country. I think is an exertion of sovereignty and a focus of concerted action, peaceful protest, and assertion of our sovereignty across the board. And I think that it's it's very inspiring to see that.
Sub-Chief Jacobs?
You made a statement about Mr. O'Donnell did a clip, and you used the term, "we had a connection." We still have that connection to the land, and that's why this is so important to the Oklahoma people across Canada and the United States. And I seen a very short Facebook video posting of a community, I believe in Iowa or somewhere, that they were all standing alone, and they were protesting also about this pipeline. So it is gaining momentum. So it's gaining momentum outside of Indian country also. And maybe they're starting to wake up and realize that what we're fighting for, not just for our own selves as us being Oklahoma people, but what we're standing for as far as protecting the land, maybe it's starting to send a message for others to wake up, of all races, not just Oklahoma people.
Once again, Yawangoa. Thank you for watching this episode of Onkwariwa'shón. I'm your host, Brendan White. Until next time, Onigi.